Ever feel like mornings are just, a chaotic scramble? Like
Yeah.
you're trying to get ready, fueled by like whatever caffeine you can grab and just barely holding it all together.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Right. I mean, I know I've definitely had those mornings where I look at someone who just seems to glide through their day and I'm like, how? How do they do it? How do they like seize control right from the start?
Right.
And it's something we're going to dive into today for all of you listening.
Yeah, we're really excited to unpack this idea of morning routines
Yeah.
today and forget the sort of relentlessly cheerful morning person image, right?
Yeah.
Because as a lot of the individuals we've studied actually point out, that's not really the goal. Instead, we're going to take a deep dive into the real-world morning routines of a diverse group of successful people.
Right.
So, writers, CEOs, athletes, and more. And we're drawing all this from interviews compiled in my morning routine.
Yeah, this is your shortcut to understanding what actually works without having to read through all those stories yourself.
Yep.
And I think what's fascinating right off the bat is there's no single magic formula,
Yeah.
right? Like we saw everything from intense workouts before dawn to quiet moments of reading and reflection.
Right.
And also, these aren't static rituals. They evolve as life throws different things our way.
Yeah, for sure.
Our mission today is to pull out the most insightful similarities and surprising differences so you listening can find some inspiration for crafting a morning that sets you up for success.
Yeah, and something that I found really insightful was just how important the underlying intention is behind these routines.
Okay.
The introduction to our sources, or as it's noted, really emphasizes how consciously designing that first hour can shape your entire day.
Wow.
It can impact both what you accomplish and, just your inner calm.
That's huge. And it's so crucial to remember, as Anna Marie Cox, one of the people featured in my morning routine, wisely observes, these routines are not externally imposed rules. They're personal tools. You create them for yourself. It's about finding what fits you.
Yeah.
If you're thinking, well, it's easy for them, they're naturally early risers.
Yeah,
Rachel Binks offers a really interesting counterpoint.
I love that.
Her focus isn't actually on when you wake up, but on making sure that you get enough sleep overall.
That's a key distinction. And so Sari goes on to clarify that morning is really a relative concept.
Yeah.
The real leverage comes not from like the crack of dawn or anything.
Yeah.
It comes from how you utilize that first hour after you wake up, whenever that happens to be, to focus on your priorities.
Yes.
So it's really about making that initial period intentional.
Okay, so let's get into the nitty-gritty here.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the get-up strategies, because let's be honest, that alarm clock can sometimes feel like the starting gun for a daily battle.
Totally.
Right. We noticed that consistency seems to be a theme for some of these folks, like Caroline Paul, James Freeman, and Leo Raphael Rafe. They all really value a regular wake-up time. It seems that predictability can really create that sense of stability for the rest of the day.
Right. And Caroline Paul also shares her experience with the alarm versus natural waking thing
Yeah.
and points out that the attempt to wake up naturally can sometimes create more anxiety
Oh, interesting.
than just setting an alarm and sticking to it.
Yeah, and that makes sense, right? You're like, when am I going to wake up? Is it going to be on time?
Yeah, exactly. And she also has this wonderful descriptive term for her pets waking her up.
Oh, yeah.
She calls it the animal snooze button, which I love.
Oh, that's so good. It's true, though.
It really is.
Like my cat.
And it's just a good reminder that our environment, even our furry friends, can play a role.
Right. And then there's James Freeman with perhaps the most motivating alarm clock ever, an old espresso machine.
That's amazing.
Talk about an incentive to get out of bed.
Wow.
Now, if you're listening and finding those early hours a struggle, there's some hope.
Yeah, for sure.
The Chi section, which translates roughly to try it yourself or actionable advice, offers some really practical tips on how to gradually adjust your wake-up time,
Yeah.
right? So like those small incremental shifts can actually make a big difference without feeling like a shock to the system.
Absolutely. What I also thought was really interesting were just some of the more unconventional approaches that people have adopted
Oh, yeah.
to getting up on time. So David Moore observes that getting a dog is a pretty surefire way to avoid oversleeping.
It's true. It's very true.
It certainly resonates with a lot of pet owners.
Yeah. No snooze button there.
No, none at all. And of course, as any parent knows, children are also remarkably effective, if somewhat unpredictable, alarm clocks.
They really are, like little tiny dictators.
They are.
You must get up now.
Yeah. You were talking about the snooze button earlier.
Yeah.
I thought this was interesting. There was this surprisingly powerful habit that came up of making the bed.
Mhm.
And Heidi Sester has this quote about it where she says that it just brings a sense of order and accomplishment to her world, which is pretty striking,
I love that.
and even the military rationale behind it. So the idea of like instilling discipline and achieving a small victory first thing,
Right.
that offers a really insightful perspective on why this simple act can actually have psychological benefits.
Oh, I love that. That's so interesting. It's like a tiny win to start your day.
Exactly. But this also brings up a really interesting debate around the snooze button.
Yeah, because I feel like everyone's always told don't hit the snooze button.
Right, exactly. So the common wisdom, and Gary Miller's quote, really gets at this, is against it.
Okay.
The idea is that it creates this fragmented sleep that isn't truly restful.
Right.
But then Eli Trier offers this really different perspective. He actually finds that those moments in the liminal space between sleep and wakefulness can spark creative insights.
Oh, that's interesting.
It is.
Yeah.
And it's a good reminder that personal experience can sometimes go against what the general advice might be.
Totally, totally. And I feel like for those who do struggle with the allure of the snooze button, Lindsay champions strategy of just putting the alarm in another room,
Yeah.
it's a classic for a reason.
It is a class.
Just to physically get up, you know? And it makes that temptation to crawl back into bed just a little less powerful.
Right. It takes away that option. So now that we've talked about how to get out of bed,
Yes.
let's explore how these successful individuals actually leverage their mornings for focus and productivity.
Yeah.
So our sources really emphasize the value of those initial hours for concentrated work.
Okay.
Both Inchio and the introductory section of the Tire, or Chapter 2, highlight this as prime time to tackle important tasks
Okay.
without the distractions that tend to creep in later in the day.
And Sayano is a big proponent of the one thing before email principle.
Yes.
It's all about prioritizing your own key tasks before getting drawn into the demands and the agendas of others. And this idea of intentionality is further supported by that recurring emphasis on having a pre-planned to-do list. We see that with Unosio, Gunti-sans, and again in that 2 section.
It comes up again and again.
Yeah, prioritizing those most crucial tasks, as Cirrus stresses, seems to be a cornerstone of having a productive morning.
Absolutely. And what I thought was really insightful here is this concept of deep work versus shallow work.
Okay.
So Carl Newport defines deep work, and he does this via as focused, distraction-free professional activity.
Okay.
That pushes those big, important goals forward.
Okay.
And that's in contrast to shallow work, which tends to be more logistical, less cognitively demanding, often done while you're multitasking.
Right.
So the advice that we see again and again is to dedicate those precious morning hours to deep, impactful work.
Okay, so deep work in the morning, check. Another piece of advice that's hard to ignore is don't check email first thing in the morning.
Absolutely.
Right, like, Carry-On's quote about how awful it feels if it derails your own priorities.
Right.
Scott Adams's analogy of email as an endless game of ping pong really gets at this.
Yes.
Tracy Chow offers a slightly more nuanced perspective, I think, which is to quickly address emails that can be resolved with a brief reply.
Right.
So maybe you just take care of those really quick ones and then move on.
Right. It's like a practical middle ground
Yeah.
for those who do feel that urge to stay connected.
Yeah.
And the idea of minimizing those morning meetings and calls, moved away from those daily breakfast meetings. And Laura Vanderkam talks about how she strategically schedules calls later in the day.
That makes total sense, right? Because if those early hours are when you're the most focused,
Exactly.
why blow them on something that could be done later?
Right. And the Chi section also provides this really great actionable tip. Break down big goals
Okay.
into smaller, more manageable steps.
Right.
This can make large, sometimes intimidating tasks feel way less daunting
Yeah.
to tackle in the morning when your energy and focus are high.
Right. It's like you're tricking your brain.
It is a little bit,
Mhm.
but it's important to remember, and this is something that Chris Guillebeau points out, that morning productivity isn't a universal phenomenon.
Yeah.
And he actually offers this concept of reverse engineering your routine.
Oh, interesting.
So figuring out when your natural energy cycles are strongest and tailoring your work to those times,
Yeah.
even if it's not the traditional morning.
That's such a good point.
So it's really about working with your own biology.
All right, so let's shift gears a little bit.
Yeah.
And talk about the role of food and drink.
Okay.
It is so fascinating to see the variety in breakfast habits here.
Yeah.
So we have Caroline Paul with her very efficient energy bars.
Yeah.
And then you contrast that with James Freeman and his almost ritualistic cappuccino.
Right.
And he also has this rule, no big decisions before coffee, which I think we can all relate to.
I think so. And then we have Andre D. Wagner, who highlights a different kind of fuel for the morning.
Okay.
And that's just a clean and uncluttered environment.
Ah, interesting.
So for him, that sense of order is what sets the tone more than any specific food.
That makes sense. It's like your environment is setting you up for success.
Exactly. And then you have Leo Raphael Reif, who combines his breakfast with staying informed, right? He likes to read the news while he eats.
Oh, wow. So he's multitasking. I like that.
Yeah.
And the dietary choices themselves are just as diverse.
Oh, yeah.
We've got everything from Daisy Khan's alkaline diet and her pre-dawn meal, the suhoor during Ramadan,
Right.
all the way to Tyler Cowen's rather unconventional smoked trout and cheese.
Yeah.
Then there's Tim O'Reilly's comforting tea and Jeff Colvin's meticulously prepared oatmeal,
Yeah.
which he relies on a Japanese rice cooker to make.
He does. He's got a whole system. And talking about routines, I thought this was interesting.
Yeah.
James Freeman's pre-sleep habit of cleaning the kitchen is a great example of how your evening routine can impact your morning in a positive way.
Oh, for sure.
It just sets the stage for a more peaceful start.
Yeah.
And Leo Raphael Reif's practice of drinking water immediately upon waking is a very simple but often overlooked piece of advice
Right.
for rehydrating after sleep.
Yeah.
Rebecca Soni also emphasizes the importance of mindful eating and hydration first thing in the morning.
That's great advice. So we've covered food, we've covered drink.
We have.
Now let's dive into movement and exercise.
Okay.
This is a recurring theme
Yeah.
in a lot of these successful individuals' mornings.
Yeah, it really is.
So Stanley McChrystal's commitment to that morning workout, even starting at 4 a.m., is pretty remarkable.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And what's really interesting about McChrystal is how his exercise routine has evolved over time. So as he's gotten older, he's shifted from mainly running to incorporating more weight training and strength training.
Right.
And, the fact that he maintained this routine, even while serving in Iraq and Afghanistan, adapting to some incredibly demanding circumstances,
Yeah.
that really just highlights how important this is to him.
Yeah. Rebecca Soni also demonstrates the strong commitment to morning movement.
Yeah.
She has a diverse range of activities she enjoys: running, swimming, paddleboarding, yoga.
Wow.
The preparation aspect is also super important, right? Both Stanley McChrystal and Kevin Cleary talk about that.
Yeah.
Laying out your clothes or your equipment the night before can really eliminate a significant hurdle to getting that workout in.
Totally. That prep work the night before makes it so much easier to actually follow through.
Yes, absolutely. McChrystal also makes a point of integrating family into his weekend exercise.
That's nice.
Right, turning it into this opportunity for connection,
Yeah.
shared activity. And then there's Kevin Cleary, who's tracked his workouts for almost 2 decades.
That's amazing.
Right. And he's very willing to adjust his training based on his goals.
So intense.
Right. So Jillian Michaels offers, I think, a more flexible perspective, emphasizing that exercise can happen anytime, anywhere, right?
Yeah.
Which I think can be encouraging for those who don't have that rigid morning schedule.
Absolutely. And it's also interesting to contrast that with Sheryl Sandberg, who actually admits to struggling to prioritize working out in the morning.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that even highly successful people don't find it easy to fit in all the habits they want to.
They're human too.
Right.
Right.
They are.
Yeah, and then Matthew Weatherly White views exercise as a form of meditation. He considers it like a foundational building block for his day.
Right.
And he highlights that mental clarity and focus it gives, in addition to the physical benefits.
But it's not just about the physical.
Right. And McChrystal's concept of the limiting factor is also worth noting.
Okay.
Right, in the context of his routine, because he acknowledges that sometimes external things will inevitably disrupt even our most ingrained habits. And he offers the advice to actually tackle those necessary but maybe less enjoyable tasks early in the morning.
That makes sense. Get them out of the way.
Get them out of the way when your willpower is high.
Exactly.
All right, let's move on to mindfulness and mental preparation.
Okay.
It's clear that a lot of these routines include practices that go way beyond physical activity.
Right.
So Caroline Paul, for example, really values her quiet time for reading.
Yeah. And for Andre D. Wagner, his form of meditation involved waking up in his clean and peaceful apartment, surrounded by morning light, and he likes to listen to Miles Davis.
Nice.
It's a more sensory and environment-focused approach, I think,
Yeah.
to finding calm and getting centered.
Yeah.
Tim O'Reilly integrates physical elements, like planking and stretching, with moments of appreciating nature as his way of mindfulness.
That's beautiful. And Daisy Khan's morning prayers during Ramadan are, of course, a central aspect of her spiritual practice.
Yeah. And then there's Jeff Colvin, who reads non-work-related material before bed, and you could see that as a form of winding down and preparing for sleep.
Yeah.
Which then benefits his morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hannah's practice of journaling before even looking at email is a very deliberate act of connecting with his own thoughts and priorities.
Right, before getting pulled in by those external demands.
Exactly. Sheena Brady incorporates meditation into her morning, and Greg Carey focuses on cultivating his inner self by playing piano and meditating.
Yeah.
Maria Konnikova also includes yoga and meditation in her mornings. And it's interesting because she readily acknowledges that she's disorganized in other areas of her life.
Yeah.
It's almost like that structured morning provides this really valuable anchor.
Yeah, I love that. And then Matthew Weatherly White really emphasizes creating white space in his mornings.
Okay.
To do focused work. He avoids any sense of urgency or rushing.
Yeah.
And then we have Shaka Singhor highlighting the power of gratitude practice. And Aaron Lochner, who incorporates morning prayer.
So many different approaches to this idea of like centering yourself.
Right. And then the last thing to think about is just the crucial role of sleep and those evening routines.
Right.
In setting yourself up for a good morning.
Yeah, because you're not going to have a good morning if you had a terrible night.
You're not.
Mm.
So Caroline Paul prioritizes going to bed early.
Good advice.
Yeah.
And then James Freeman has that habit of tidying up before sleep.
Right.
Which contributes to a calmer morning environment.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And Leo Raphael Riff reviews his schedule for the next day and reads before going to sleep.
Okay.
Tyler Cowan has a very specific bedtime.
Okay.
And he prefers taking a shower before sleep.
Interesting.
He has a whole rationale against morning showers.
Okay.
Tim O'Reilly enjoys a pre-sleep ritual of playing Boggle with his wife and then reading. Jeff Colvin also prioritizes getting enough sleep, and he also reads non-work-related material before bed.
Greg Carey has a really lovely evening ritual where he shares tea with his wife and they kind of review their day.
I love that.
And he said sometimes they even reflect on Benjamin Franklin's virtues.
That's great.
Which is really cool.
It is. And Maria Konikova's pre-sleep to-do list, which she admits she rarely actually looks at again, seems to be more about that mental decluttering process before sleep.
Yeah, like getting it out of your head and onto the paper.
Exactly.
And then there's Ojino, who emphasizes avoiding those unproductive late nights.
Right. I think it's really striking just how many of these high achievers recognize that a good morning doesn't just magically happen.
Yeah.
It's a result of habits and routines established the night before.
And then we can't overlook how these routines adapt to travel disruption.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Because travel can really throw you off.
Right. So Caroline Paul actually goes to great lengths to pack certain items that help her maintain her routine on the road.
Right.
James Freeman has a portable coffee setup.
Smart.
Right.
Yeah.
And he relies on a workout app to stay active when he's not at his regular gym.
Yeah. And Daisy Khan makes adjustments to her routine to account for the different time zones and environments.
That makes sense.
When she travels. Tim O'Reilly really prioritizes rest and movement, adopting a more flexible approach to his routine when he's traveling.
Okay.
Bill McNabb relies on simple equipment like jump ropes and TRX bands.
Yeah.
And Kevin Cleary stays committed to at least some form of morning movement, even when his usual routine is disrupted.
So it seems like the key takeaway here is to be adaptable, but to stay committed to those core pieces of your routine.
Yeah, and I think what's so noteworthy is the commitment to maintaining some element of their routine.
Yeah.
Even when their environment and their surroundings are changing dramatically.
Right.
And I think this highlights how valuable these habits are.
Yeah.
To their well-being, to their productivity. It provides a sense of normalcy amidst the chaos of travel.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is like the overarching message here for our listeners?
I think ultimately it comes down to this. There's no single morning routine that's universally perfect or guaranteed to make you successful.
Yeah.
But the act of intentionally designing your morning
Yes.
in a way that aligns with your needs and your goals,
Yes.
that can have a significant impact on how your day unfolds.
It's about experimentation.
Yeah.
Shaka Senghor put it so well, adapting your routine as you move through different phases of life.
Exactly.
And we've seen this huge variety of approaches, but those common threads that tie them together are intention, a focus on what really matters, and engaging with those priorities before the day's demands take over.
Absolutely. And that leads to a question for all of you listening right now.
Yes.
Based on everything that we've explored today, what's one small, realistic change that you could implement in your morning starting tomorrow?
Yeah.
So maybe it's putting your phone in another room tonight, or trying to wake up 5 minutes earlier, or taking a look at those B sections again for some more specific ideas.
Yeah.
This is really an invitation for all of you to embark on your own deep dive into your personal morning routine.
Love it.
What feels right for you? What small tweak could maybe lead to a more focused, more productive, and even a little more peaceful day?
That's the question.
That is the question.
And your exploration starts now.
It does.